My father forgot to hang up. I heard him laugh and say, "He'll never become anything. He's only a loser living off our name." I stayed completely silent. Sold my $1.2 million home and vanished. They returned from vacation, laughing until the front door key wouldn't work. There was only a handwritten note waiting for them. Can you imagine hearing your own father, the man who's supposed to be your biggest supporter, openly call you a loser, and then laugh about it with his friends? That day, something inside me didn't just break, it shattered into a million pieces. And I decided, right then and there, that I was going to disappear. I was 32. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just a normal call with my dad, talking about some minor thing with my house, the house I bought, cash, 3 years ago. We were wrapping up, or so I thought. But he didn't hang up. The line was still open. I should have ended it right then, but some morbid curiosity just froze my finger over the screen. Then I heard voices. His voice came through, clear as day, now talking to someone else. He was chuckling. That deep, rumbling laugh I'd known my whole life. Someone asked him about me, about how I was doing. What came next? My blood ran absolutely cold. He said I'd never amount to anything. Called me a loser, living off their name, riding on the family reputation they'd built. His friend laughed, too. Made some joke about how they tried their best, but some kids just don't have it in them. And my dad? He agreed. Enthusiastically. Then he mentioned their vacation next week, saying, "At least we won't have to worry about him bothering us for a while." I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, listening. For 20 agonizing minutes. 20 minutes of my father casually dismantling everything I thought I knew about our relationship. He told his friends how disappointed he was, how my mom shared his feelings, but they kept up appearances for family harmony. How my sister was the successful one, the one who made them proud, while I was just dead weight clinging to their legacy. The crazy thing is, I'd built my own success. I started a software consulting firm right out of college, worked 70-hour weeks for 5 years straight. My company had 12 employees, pulling in solid 7 figures annually. I bought my house with cash from my first major contract. Never asked them for a penny after I turned 23. But in their minds? I was nothing. A failure. A disappointment they had to tolerate. I finally hung up. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of my kitchen. I sat at my table, staring at the marble countertop I'd installed myself last summer. And I made a decision. They were leaving for Europe in a week, their annual month-long trip they'd been planning for months. Tuscany, wine tours, Greek beaches. I had 7 days. The next morning, I called my real estate agent. She was confused when I told her I wanted to sell immediately, that price wasn't the main concern, and I needed to close within 6 days. She asked if everything was all right. I told her, my voice calm, everything's perfect. Just an opportunity one need to move on quickly. By noon, 3 investors were interested. By evening, I had 2 serious offers. One was asking price with a 4-day close. The other was $50,000 under asking, but could close in 3. I took the second one. Then I called my business partner. We'd been running the company together for 3 years. I told him I was ready to take the buyout we discussed months ago. He was shocked, but honestly, excited. We'd structured it so either partner could exit clean. He'd wanted majority control anyway. We spent 2 days with lawyers. By Thursday afternoon, I'd signed over my shares for $900,000. Combined with the house sale, I was looking at just over $2 million in liquid assets. Friday, I moved everything that really mattered into a storage unit across the state: photos, my grandfather's watch, books I'd collected, my gaming setup. Everything else? It could stay. The furniture, the appliances, the art, it all came with the house. The new owners were happy to keep it furnished. Saturday, I opened new bank accounts in a different state, transferred everything, then closed my old ones. Sunday, I went to the house where I grew up. Mom and Dad had already left that morning for their vacation, but I still had my key. I'd kept it all these years, even after moving out at 22. They'd insisted, "You're always welcome home." I let myself in. Walked through the rooms. The living room where Dad taught me chess. The kitchen where Mom baked cookies. My old bedroom, now a guest room. I felt nothing. In the foyer, I left an envelope. Inside, a single, handwritten note. I kept it simple, heard every word on Tuesday. "Congratulations, you finally got rid of the loser. Don't look for me. You won't find me. Live your best life with your successful daughter. P.S. My name is off everything. The house is sold. The business is sold. I never needed your name anyway." I left my key inside the envelope. Monday morning, I drove 8 hours to a city I'd visited once for a conference. Rented a short-term apartment. Started looking at properties. By Wednesday, I put an offer on a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a solid 3-bedroom with good workspace for the freelance consulting I plan to do. My phone rang constantly that first week. Mom, Dad, my sister, aunts, uncles, cousins. I watched the calls come in, letting every single one go to voicemail. Eventually, I listened to a few messages. Mom was crying, asking where I was, what happened, why I'd done this. Dad sounded angry, demanding I call him back, calling me childish and irresponsible. My sister was confused. She said Mom and Dad came home from vacation to find their key didn't work for my house. The new owners had already changed the locks and found my note. Apparently, they cut their vacation short, coming home after just 4 days. They found my note. Called me immediately, got nothing. They went to my house next. The new owners answered, utterly confused why these people were asking about the previous resident. They'd already moved in, already made it their home. Dad called my business. My former partner told them I'd sold my shares and left. No forwarding info, no timeline for return. Just, gone. Then they tried to file a missing person report. The police called me. I assured them I was fine, just relocating for personal reasons, and asked them to note in their system that I was not missing and did not wish to be contacted by family. The officers sounded tired, but surprisingly understanding. The voicemails continued for 3 weeks. Moms went from confused to hurt, then angry, then utterly devastated. Dad stayed angry. My sister tried to play mediator, saying whatever happened could be fixed if we just talked. But there was nothing to fix. They'd shown me exactly how they felt. That phone call hadn't been a moment of weakness or frustration. It had been honest. They genuinely believed I was worthless. After a month, the calls slowed. After 2 months, they stopped entirely. I bought my new house, set up my home office, started taking on freelance consulting projects. I was good at what I did. Companies paid me obscene amounts for 3-month contracts I could finish in 6 weeks. I worked when I wanted, traveled when I felt like it, and answered to nobody. 6 months after I left, my sister found me. I still don't know how. Maybe she hired someone. Maybe she got lucky. Maybe she was just persistent. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired. She asked if she could come in. I told her we could talk on the porch. She sat on my steps and asked why I disappeared. I reminded her about the phone call. She said Mom and Dad told her about it, that it was taken out of context, that they'd been having a bad day and venting. I looked at her. Do you really believe that? She went quiet. Then she told me the truth. Mom and Dad had been comparing us for years, always holding her up as the golden child, the successful one, while dismissing everything I did. She'd known it was happening, but never said anything because she liked being the favorite. She was ashamed now, seeing what it had driven me to do. I asked her what she wanted from me. She said Mom was depressed, barely leaving the house. Dad had thrown himself into work, staying at the office until midnight. They told everyone I'd moved for a job opportunity, but the family knew something was wrong. Everyone was asking questions they couldn't answer. She said they wanted to apologize, to make things right, that they realized they'd made a terrible mistake and wanted me to come home. I told her, my voice flat, I am home. This is my home now. And I have no intention of going back to play happy family with people who think I'm worthless. She cried. Said I was breaking Mom's heart, that she'd aged 10 years in 6 months. I replied, Mom should have thought about that before spending years thinking her son was a failure. She said Dad felt terrible, that he'd said things he didn't mean. No, I countered, Dad feels terrible about getting caught, not about what he actually believes. She sat there for a long time, tears running down her face. Finally, she asked if there was anything they could do, any way to fix this. I told her, they can live their lives, and I'll live mine. I hope they're happy with their successful daughter, because they'll never see their disappointing son again. She left after that. Didn't argue, didn't plead anymore. Just got in her car and drove away. It's been a year now since I disappeared. Life settled into something resembling normal, though normal looks nothing like it used to. My freelance consulting took off in ways I hadn't expected. Turns out when you're not tied to one company or one city, you become incredibly valuable to firms that need specialized expertise for short-term projects. I was pulling in more money than I ever did running my company, working half the hours, with zero stress about payroll or overhead. I'd made new friends. Joined a rock climbing gym. Started playing poker on Thursday nights with a group of guys who knew me as someone who worked in tech and kept to himself. They didn't know my history, didn't ask probing questions, didn't care about my family situation. It was refreshing. Then my sister showed up again, but with a different approach this time. She called first, asked if she could visit. I almost said no, but something in her voice made me agree to meet at a coffee shop instead. She came alone. Looked better than she had 6 months ago, more put together. She ordered a latte and sat across from me with the kind of determined expression I remembered from when we were kids, and she really wanted something. She said she wasn't there to plead their case. She'd spent the last 6 months thinking about everything. About how she'd benefited from their favoritism, how she'd watched them dismiss me and never spoke up. She apologized for that. A real apology. Not the half-hearted, sorry you feel that way, kind of apology. I asked her what changed. She said she'd had dinner with them a few weeks ago, and Dad started talking about a colleague's son who just failed out of grad school. The way he spoke about it, the contempt in his voice, she suddenly heard what I must have heard my entire life. She called him out on it. They fought. Dad said she was being too sensitive, that he'd never spoken about me that way. That's when she played him a voicemail. She'd been saving it since I disappeared. On it, Dad was venting to her about how I'd overreacted to a private conversation, how I was proving his point by running away like a child. He even said, maybe it was better this way. They could stop pretending I was going to make something of myself. She said watching his face as he heard his own words was one of the most satisfying moments of her life. He tried to backtrack, said he was angry and didn't mean it. She told him, that's the problem, Dad. You've been saying things like that for so long, you don't even recognize it anymore. I asked her about Mom. She shook her head. Mom was still convinced this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd come home eventually, that families forgive each other. She was deep in denial, rewriting history in her head, where she'd always been supportive and loving. My sister said she wasn't asking me to reconcile. She just wanted me to know that she finally understood, and she was sorry she hadn't understood sooner. She said she'd cut back on visiting them, started setting boundaries, stopped accepting their money for things because she realized every dollar came with invisible strings attached. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time since we were teenagers. She told me about her own struggles with their expectations, how being the golden child meant she could never fail, never show weakness, never be anything less than perfect. How she was in therapy now, unpacking all of it. I told her about my new life, the freedom of it, the simplicity, how I'd gone on dates with a woman I met at the climbing gym, nothing serious yet, but nice. How I was thinking about buying a small cabin in the mountains as a weekend getaway. How I slept better than I had in years. She smiled at that, said I looked happy, truly happy, not the stressed out, exhausted version of happy I'd always projected before. Before she left, she asked if she could stay in touch. Not on their behalf, just as siblings. Maybe grab coffee every few months, text occasionally, be part of each other's lives in this small way. I thought about it. Told her I needed time. She understood. Gave me her new number, she'd changed it after our parents started using her as a messenger service. Said the ball was in my court. No pressure. 18 months since I left. Things took an unexpected turn. I'd been slowly rebuilding a relationship with my sister. Coffee every 6 weeks or so, texts here and there. She kept her word about not being a messenger. Never brought up our parents unless I asked, which I occasionally did out of morbid curiosity. Then Dad had a heart attack. My sister called me from the hospital. He was stable, going to be fine, but it had been serious. She said Mom was a mess. The doctors said stress was a major factor. She very carefully told me this was just information. She wasn't asking me to do anything with it. I thanked her and hung up. I spent 3 days thinking about it. Part of me felt nothing. Part of me felt like maybe I should feel something and was disturbed that I didn't. Part of me wondered if I was becoming the cold person they'd always accused me of being. I didn't go to the hospital. Didn't call. I sent a card through my sister that said, I hope you recover fully. That was it. My sister told me later that Mom cried when she saw the card. Asked if that meant I'd come visit. My sister told her no. It meant exactly what it said, and nothing more. 2 weeks after Dad got out of the hospital, I got a letter. Not email, not text. An actual letter in the mail. My sister must have given them my address. I was annoyed about that, but I understood why she had. It was from Dad. 4 pages, handwritten. I almost threw it away without reading it, but I read it. He apologized. Really apologized. Not the non-apology version where someone says they're sorry you feel that way. He said he'd spent his time in the hospital thinking about his life, about what mattered, about what he'd lost. He said he'd been wrong about me. Wrong about everything. That his own insecurities and need for control had poisoned how he saw his own son. He said he'd built his career on being right, on being the smartest person in the room, and somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring everyone against impossible standards. That he'd done it to my sister, too, just in different ways. That he'd driven me away and was now losing her, too. He said he didn't expect forgiveness. Didn't expect me to call or visit or come back. He just wanted me to know that he was wrong, that I'd been right to leave, and that he was sorry it took a heart attack to make him see what he destroyed. The last line was simple: you became everything I could never be. Strong enough to walk away from people who hurt you. I'm proud of you, even if I have no right to be. I read that letter 5 times. I cried after the third, though I'm not entirely sure why. I didn't respond. Filed it away in a drawer and went about my life. 3 months later, my sister called again. Dad had asked if she thought I'd be willing to meet with him. Just once. Just coffee. No expectations. She told him she didn't know, but would ask me. I said no. She said she'd expected that. Told him I declined. She said he took it quietly, just nodded, and thanked her for asking. But something about that conversation stuck with me. The fact that he'd asked instead of demanded. That he'd accepted my no without argument. That he was apparently trying, in whatever way he knew how. I called my sister a week later. I said I'd meet him once. In public. For 1 hour. And if he tried to manipulate me or guilt me or excuse his behavior, I'd leave, and that would be the end of it forever. She set it up. A coffee shop in a city halfway between where he lived and where I'd settled. Neutral ground. I showed up 15 minutes late, on purpose. I wanted him to sit there, wondering if I'd come. He looked old. That was my first thought. He'd aged more than 18 months should account for. Thinner, grayer, something defeated in his posture. He stood when I arrived, didn't try to hug me or shake my hand. Just said, "Thank you for coming," and sat back down. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he started talking. He didn't make excuses. Told me he'd been seeing a therapist since the heart attack. That unpacking years of his own father's expectations, and his need to project success, was harder than he'd expected. He said he'd replayed that phone call in his head 1,000 times, heard what I must have heard, understood why I'd left. He said Mom was struggling more. She still couldn't quite grasp that this wasn't fixable with an apology and a family dinner. She kept asking when I was coming home for the holidays, talking about me in present tense, like I was just away temporarily. I asked him what he wanted from this meeting. He said, nothing. He just wanted me to hear that he was sorry, that he was working on himself, and that he'd respect whatever boundaries I set. I told him the boundaries were simple. We aren't family anymore. You made that clear with your words, and I made it official by leaving. I'm not interested in rebuilding a father-son relationship, but I am willing to be civil if our paths cross for my sister's sake. He took that better than I expected. Just nodded. Said that was more than fair, more than he deserved. We sat for another 30 minutes. Talked about neutral things, his work, my freelancing, places we'd traveled recently. It was oddly normal, like talking to an acquaintance you vaguely knew years ago. When the hour was up, I stood to leave. He asked if there was any chance I'd consider meeting again someday. Not soon, but eventually. I told him I'd think about it. He seemed satisfied with that. I haven't seen him since. My sister tells me he asks about me sometimes. Not pushing, just checking in. I got a birthday card this year. Simple message inside, "Hope you're doing well, Dad." I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. It's in the drawer with his letter. Maybe someday I'll know what to do with them. Maybe I won't. For now, they're just artifacts of a life I used to have, filed away with everything else I left behind. So, what do you all think? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand like this, even with family? I'd really love to hear your experiences in the comments below.